The New Orleans Saints shake up their coaching staff, but Dennis Allen is still in town. Could a Gruden be headed to the Big Easy? We'll get into that, plus the best fit for Bill Belichick. And will Chicago go with a quarterback at number 1 overall?
You are Locked On NFL, your daily NFL podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi again, everyone, and welcome into another edition of Locked On NFL. He's Lorin Cox in for Chris Carter. I'm James Rapien, and this is your Wednesday edition. Thank you so much for making us your first listen here on Locked On NFL, your team and your league every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Jase Medical. Empower yourself when you purchase a Jase case, providing you with a personal supply of 5 antibiotics that treat 50-plus infections. Get yours today at jasemedical.com and use code Locked On to get $20 off your order. That's JASE And Lorin, we got some news on Tuesday afternoon as we record this show. The Saints, they're shaking up their offensive staff, including offensive coordinator Pete Carmichael out. And your instant reaction had to do with who could be coming in alongside Dennis Allen, who remains as head coach. I think it's a really interesting scenario here involving Jon Gruden in the Big Easy.
And really interesting timing here, too, that this firing happens on the morning of Tuesday, January 16th. The Saints season ended a couple of weeks ago, and you've seen pretty much every team that is going to make coaching staff changes that weren't in the playoffs make those coaching staff changes right after the season, right? It's kind of like, okay, you take a day or two maybe to do exit interviews and talk to guys and maybe mull a few things over, but usually it's not like a week or two to make a decision like this. So the timing is just interesting when we're only about a week removed from the report. I think it came from NOLA.com that, the Saints were interested or considering Gruden as a potential addition to their coaching staff. A week later, lo and behold, that offensive coordinator position is open, as well as I think receivers coach and a couple of other assistants there. I would imagine if Jon Gruden was going to come to the New Orleans Saints, he wouldn't just come in as, assistant quarterbacks coach, that he would want to come in and be something prominent, not have to build his way up from position coach. So seems like a nice, clear channel for Gruden to come in, but an interesting decision for both on and off field reasons with Jon Gruden.
Yeah, there's a lot there. And let's start with the decision. And I think a lot of franchises do this. They keep Dennis Allen, but they're completely overhauling the offensive staff, the main guy, the main coaches on that staff. I think it's going to be hard for him to retain that job and get a second contract. And it's really hard in the NFL. It's hard to get a head coaching job. It's that much harder to get a second contract. And that's what Dennis Allen is trying to do with the Saints. And so I get it from his standpoint. Do what you got to do to try to survive. But from a Saints standpoint, where's the path for this to work? And just throw Gruden out of it. It's not like you're completely overhauling your quarterback room again. I think you're going to have the quarterback that you have. And maybe you could make the argument, Derek Carr really gets along with Jon Gruden, and that can work. And we saw glimpses of it in Las Vegas. And I guess you could make that case. But this doesn't feel like what's the best case scenario? 10-7? And is it worth it? Is it worth to kick the can down the road? And is it worth hiring Jon Gruden for a bunch of reasons? By the way, if I'm Dennis Allen and I see Gruden in the building, head coach in waiting, I know you can't necessarily think about that when you're struggling to keep your job, but that would be in the back of my mind.
I can't help but wonder if Dennis Allen looks at it and says, listen, the Saints have had a lot of these types of off-field scandals. I know there's been sort of that situation with the Catholic Church and the ownership of the Saints trying to help with sort of covering up or dealing with the aftermath from some other really serious off-the-field issues. And I wonder if Dennis Allen looks at it and says, listen, can this franchise hire Jon Gruden as a head coach, right? After 1 year as offensive coordinator? Let's say they hire him as an offensive coordinator this season and things go south and Dennis Allen gets fired. Is that enough of a retribution tour for Jon Gruden to, earn forgiveness for his sins of direct and overt racism in emails, to go from, okay, well, he did 1 year as an offensive coordinator, now oh, no worries, you're fine to be back as a head coach, no problem. I know, like, wasn't he suing the NFL about some of the leaks involved with that process? Like, it's one thing to be suing the NFL and be a coordinator like Brian Flores. It's another thing to be suing the NFL and to get a head coaching job and be, directly hired by ownership there that also, I think, doesn't necessarily want to deal with some of the off the field drama there. Like, to me, maybe it's safe enough that you say, okay, he could be an offensive coordinator, but not going to get the head coach job right away because of the toxicity that still exists around him. But we'll deal with some of the adversity there with him being hidden a little bit as the offensive coordinator, but he can still sort of start his redemption tour there and try and put something together. I mean, I can see where Dennis Allen sees it as like a safe way of introducing an experienced coach who's, by the way, worked with Derek Carr very successfully, and then also maybe not be so threatened that he's going to take your job because he just feels a little bit too poisonous to take your job after 1 year.
Sure. And that's the other element of this where, yeah, maybe it's similar to me, and we'll talk about Bill Belichick coming up. Like, I know Bill Belichick's going to get the offensive coordinator right now because Josh McDaniels should be his offensive coordinator. And Josh McDaniels is a heck of an offensive coordinator. Like, we know he's that. I don't want him to be the head coach. The only time he should be in the head coach's office is when he's talking to Bill, but you never have to, you'll never have to hire him to be head coach because we've been there, done that now in two different teams. It didn't work. There's a 30 left at the altar, which whether that was right or wrong doesn't matter. The fact is, I think that works out. So maybe he does view it that way. And maybe this could work. And maybe the Derek Carr aspect of things, he can channel what he did in 2021, where he was really good. Derek Carr was good for the Raiders in 21. The past couple of years, I think he's regressed some. He showed flashes this year. You could talk about the Saints' weapons too, outside of Chris Olave. We'll see. But I think it's really interesting that they decided to hold on to Dennis Allen. I'm sure there are Saints fans that wouldn't have went that route, and yet the Saints hanging on, still searching in the post-Sean Payton, Drew Brees era to get it right. And we'll see if they can do that. Maybe with Jon Gruden. Oh, man. It's going to be interesting to follow, no doubt.
It's interesting. I mean, we kind of gloss over the firing of Pete Carmichael in all of this. I mean, he's the longest tenured offensive coordinator in the NFL. He's had that job since, I think it's 2009. Like, it's insane how long he's been. It's insane how long he's been the offensive coordinator for that team. And like this past season, sure, the Saints offense was not great, but they finished 9th in points and 14th in yards. I know their running game was particularly bad, but in most passing categories, they were at least upper half of the NFL, if not borderline top 10 statistically, which again is not the perfect measurement of how good an offense is, but it's better than other teams that haven't fired their offensive coordinator. Like, it feels a little bit to me like kind of a scapegoaty type thing. It's like, okay, well, we're not going to fire Dennis Allen because we don't want to do that as an organization, but we got to change something. Let's change the offensive coach to get a fresh mind in there, when maybe he wasn't a perfect offensive coordinator, but I wouldn't rank him at the bottom of the offensive coordinator list either, because you were just already talking about some of the other questions about the weapons and other things going on in New Orleans that aren't necessarily the coordinator's full fault. Like, I get wanting to make a change, but then making that change a week and a half later, I mean, there's just a lot of kind of weirdness around this.
A lot of weirdness around this. Up next, we'll stick in the NFC South, seeing Bill Belichick in Atlanta. Well, that would be weird. What's the likelihood of it happening? We'll discuss if it's the best fit for Bill Belichick as well, coming up next. Today's show is sponsored by BetterHelp. Sometimes we all need the opportunity to get something off of our chest, and big or small, certain things can really start to get to you. And it's important to let that out, especially to someone who's unbiased in your life. So today, I want to say how I really feel about something. You might be thinking about the same thing this week. So whether it's you worrying about work and how you're going to make things work during busy season, if you're in the office, or maybe you're like me and things have slowed down a little bit with the team you cover out of the playoff race. You're like Lorin as well in that scenario, and you're trying to make sure you get everything that you want to get done this off season. Therapy can be different for everyone. Most of us have bigger problems than our favorite sports team, and it's important to get things off your chest every once in a while. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online. It's designed to be flexible and suited to your schedule. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon.
This episode of Locked On NFL is also brought to you by our friends at PrizePicks, the better way to do daily fantasy sports, because PrizePicks puts you in complete control. Unlike other daily fantasy platforms where you're setting your lineup and hoping that your lineup can be better than 1,000 other lineups you're competing against head to head, and only that first place winner out of 1,000 really ends up getting anything. With PrizePicks, it's you versus the projections available. So you pick 2 to 6 players and whether they perform better or worse than their PrizePicks projection. And if you get your picks right, you can win up to 25 times your money. It really makes these playoff games that much more fun when you're trying to keep track of, okay, how many passing yards does CJ Stroud have? Or how many rushing yards does Lamar Jackson have? And you get those picks right, you're winning some money on top of it. It's really a lot of fun, and I highly recommend you try it for yourself. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use our promo code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. That's an extra $100 to play with at prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL. Promo code LockedOnNFL. PrizePicks, daily fantasy sports made easy.
Let's keep things rolling here with Bill Belichick. He interviewed for the Atlanta Falcons head coaching job. His first interview since parting ways with the New England Patriots after more than 2 decades, 6 Super Bowl rings. We know his resume. I think let's start here, Lauren. How do you think that interview goes when he meets with Arthur Blank, the owner of the Falcons? Obviously, you have the 28-3, and you see all those jokes on social media. But to me, I wish that this could be like a head coaching interview version of Hard Knocks. And this is the one that I would want to see out of all these guys. Bill Belichick being interviewed by different teams.
Yeah, if I'm Bill Belichick, doesn't it feel more like I'm interviewing you? As why should I come to the Atlanta Falcons, right? Not so much like why like you interviewing me to say why do I think I should be your head coach? No. Why should I, Bill Belichick, choose you when I could choose, the Chargers or the Raiders or the Commanders or whatever teams, could also be in his services? Like I would think it's not so much a purely one directional pitch there, that it's sort of a back and forth of like, certainly, Arthur Blank wants to hear what Bill Belichick's plans would be and what he might envision. But at the same time, Arthur Blank might also have to sell Bill Belichick a little bit on why Atlanta is the place for him. I mean, he's at the stage of his career where he could look around, interview for a few of these jobs and say, you know what, never mind. I'll either take this year off or just straight up retire. Like, these opportunities didn't quite do it for me. So he's got to be sold on this process too. And at the same time, Falcons got to do their due diligence and make sure that, hey, Bill, what happened in New England? Why did things get so bad? How do we know for sure that, you're not going to lead to that same thing happening here? And I imagine there's a lot of talk about power and roster control and Bill Belichick being the GM in New England and there being a GM in Atlanta, and what that conversation might look like over roster control that ultimately, again, is part of him interviewing the Falcons as far as, do I want to go here, or would another team offer me a better situation or better control or better roster, or however he might think?
Sure. I think it's such a big element to this. Does he want control? I'm sure he wants some, but does he also have the self-awareness? And I hope so, where he can look at those draft classes in New England and be like, maybe I shouldn't have complete control here. And it would be good to get a second set of eyes and get a GM in here. But that doesn't mean that you can't still have some control even with a GM. And I think that's the interesting part, and part of him interviewing these teams, because I assume he'll take more than one interview. Maybe by the time you're hearing this, there's more news about Belichick. If I had to sell him, if I'm Arthur Blank, I would say NFC South is a weak division. We have some good young pieces on offense. We've got some good pieces right now, ready-made star safety in Jesse Bates, a pretty solid secondary, decent. It's just a really good defensive lineman, depending on who you're talking about in that room. And sell him on that, on a young roster that he can help mold, that needs a little more discipline, needs a little more firepower, and needs a quarterback. And I think that's what it'll come down to. If the Falcons have a plan to get a high-end quarterback, whether it's a rookie, whether it's a veteran, which I think is harder to do right now, there's not many out there, then Belichick could probably look at it and say, hey, the Falcons can be my Buccaneers. The same way Brady went there. And people were like, Tampa Bay? And then real quick, you're like, oh, Tampa Bay. Like, you saw the vision come together quickly. I think the Falcons are sort of sneaky that way, but they would need to make some moves. And I think it does start with the quarterback spot.
Yeah, I mean, I think you and I talked about this a little bit last week when it comes to like head coaching landing spots. Like, because the last thing you said was, you need this, but you need a quarterback. And that's like such a big part of this equation, especially given how the post Tom Brady quarterbacks played out for Bill in New England. Like, yeah, that's the big ultimate X factor here, because obviously the best head coaching situation with as far as quarterbacks go right now would be the Los Angeles Chargers. We'll see if Bill interviews there or if that just ends up being Jim Harbaugh's destination. But I mean, if I'm Bill Belichick, the guarantee of Justin Herbert seems to me to be the best quarterback fit for me, and feel like, okay, I can build everything else. Just get me that next great quarterback, and that's built in there in Los Angeles. And then, if okay, that's not an option to me, then at least Washington has the number 2 overall pick and a lot of draft capital to go get a potential quarterback. But Atlanta is sitting there with the 8th overall pick, and they don't really have any other extra draft picks this season to be able to maneuver up and around the draft. I mean, they could leverage a bunch of future picks or whatever and go all in, but they don't have a lot of extra draft capital there. Or I guess they could look at free agency and say Kirk Cousins, I guess, or I mean, there's a chance Baker Mayfield hits the market there, but it is limited. Or I mean, there's the Justin Fields trade rumors that have always been lingering with the Atlanta Falcons there. Like they've got some options, but it's a tough one for Bill. Like you can have Kyle Pitts and Drake London and Bijan Robinson and love your weapons, but at the end of the day, like, can Josh McDaniels or whoever his offensive coordinator become, or Bill O'Brien or whoever, like, can they make that work if you're rolling with a Taylor Heineke type situation again, or that kind of equivalent? Or do you take the 3rd or 4th or 5th favorite rookie quarterback and try and develop? Like, does Bill want to develop a quarterback, or does he just say, listen, I'm on towards the end of my career anyway, let's get a Kirk Cousins, let's try and go do this right now and kind of go all in on winning in the next 3 to 5 years, as opposed to really kind of developing this out long game?
Well, he calls Tom Brady is what he does. No, I'm just kidding. Just kidding. I couldn't get through it. I actually, it's a good point, and we are going to talk about the Bears coming up. The Justin Fields evaluation from a few years ago, he didn't make it to the Patriots. I wonder if the Patriots would have taken him over Mac Jones had he made it to the Patriots. I love the idea of getting just this super talented quarterback that can make the throws, is capable of that, has the physical ability to run all over at Mercedes-Benz Stadium. Like, there's a lot to like about that from an athleticism standpoint. So how would he feel about that? Because that might be the pitch. Hey, we have the 8th pick. We can get Michael Penix. We can get one of these other quarterbacks that'll be there that maybe you'll like, or we can trade for Justin Fields. And I know there was speculation this week nationally about, the 8th pick. You could get Justin Fields without giving up the 8th pick. So get a stud with the 8th pick, which you'll be able to do, whether it's an offensive lineman, whether it's, heck, there'll be a really good defensive tackle or 2 available. There'll certainly be a wide receiver there, a weapon there for you to take, and get Justin Fields along with that. I think that could be the play if Belichick is in, and then you're off and running. So I think there are ways to do it. And that's the key for any team, I think, that's interviewing Bill Belichick and vice versa. How do you make the team a legitimate contender right away? And I think some would argue that they wouldn't be a contender right away with Justin Fields, but maybe that's the guy that they've identified as a guy that could put them over the top. Maybe it's hey, Jimmy Garoppolo is going to get released by the Raiders. Let's bring him in. There's familiarity there. He can help groom a young guy. I don't know, but I do think that that's the key to landing Belichick.
It does depend on how you define contender, right? I mean, they were not that far from the playoffs this year on a team that you felt like maybe was underachieving based on the talent that they had, or not getting as much out of the talent that they had. So if you take a team that was a few games out of winning the division this year and add a coach that can squeeze more out of the talent that they do have, plus an upgrade at the quarterback position in some way, shape, or form, whether it's Jimmy G and a rookie or whatever you think, like, that's a team that could easily next year with Belichick and with some kind of quarterback change be a above 500, pushing for a wild card spot and or maybe weak divisional victory type win. So yeah, I do think it's an easier sell in that way to Bill Belichick than a team like the Chargers, who say, man, we still got to get past the Chiefs here, or a team like the Commanders that I know, like the Cowboys and Eagles, just absolutely blew it in the playoffs, but still have a long way to go in that division as well.
Up next, let's discuss Justin Fields' future, and not just his future in Chicago, but the Bears. They have the first pick. What should they do with the first pick? Heck, maybe they could trade down to number 8 and Bill Belichick could get his quarterback. Look at me, just already putting Belichick in the ATL. Aaron Freeman of Locked On Falcons, not a fan of that idea. But we will get to the Chicago Bears coming up next. Today's show is brought to you by Jase Case. And I know we come to sports to escape some of the crazy realities of life. But let's talk, at least for a minute right now, about preparing for real life. Because according to the FDA, pharmacies are running out of antibiotics like amoxicillin right in the middle of the worst flu season in over a decade. That means that, well, can't imagine this, but it could happen where you need these medications and you can't get them because of supply chain issues, and they keep you or your family from life-saving medication that they need. Thankfully, you'll be okay. We'll be okay with Jase Case. The Jase Case is a pack of 5 different antibiotics to treat a long list of bacterial illnesses, including respiratory infections, skin infections, among others, things that can happen to anyone. All you have to do is visit jasemedical.com, complete a physician encounter, and it's going to be reviewed by a board-certified physician, and your medications will be dispensed by a licensed pharmacy at a fraction of the regular cost. It's never been more important than to be prepared than right now today. So go to jasemedical.com and use offer code LOCKEDON to get $20 off your order. Again, that's jasemedical.com, offer code LOCKEDON to get $20 off your order. All right, Lorin, let's get to the team you cover, the Chicago Bears. What are they going to do? They keep their head coach. They're interviewing offensive coordinators right now because they would have been a weird destination for some of these coaches out there. It feels like a really good crop of head coaching candidates, but Matt Eberflus is still in Chicago. Let's start there. Are you surprised that they're going this route? And do you think they made the right decision?
As is most of the time of recent Chicago Bears history, not surprised but disappointed is like how you can always kind of define this team. They don't like to rock the boat whenever they can avoid it. Like if they hadn't had the second half of the season turnaround that they did, I think they would have made a more drastic coaching change, but they did well enough over the final 8 games of the season for the team to say, all right, let's keep this rolling and see if they can turn things around. So not surprised there, but as you said, because it was such a good crop of head coaches, I would have gone with the change and had the opportunity to go after a Harbaugh or a Belichick, and we'll still see what comes out of Dallas and Philadelphia, but a lot of different big name coaches that could be out there that could have represented upgrades for this team. But instead, they make the offensive coordinator change, not too dissimilar to what we just talked about with the New Orleans Saints, where it's like, all right, keep the head coach, change the offense, see if that fixes anything in a year, and maybe we're doing this whole conversation over again next offseason.
Breaking, Lorin Cox says he wants Mike McCarthy in Chicago as head coach. No, I'm just kidding. You see how I twisted your words there? All right, so they keep Matt Eberflus. It's going to be there. We'll see on the OC. What are the odds Justin Fields gets traded and they do go with a quarterback? I think it's early to say Caleb Williams, even though it feels like it's going to be him, but a quarterback with that first overall pick.
Yeah, this was something that to me felt like a fairly inevitability as this season went on. That was like, yes, Justin Fields showed improvement, but not as much improvement as they really wanted to see from him. And not and in that way, it's more about a consistency thing. Like we've always seen Fields is able to do anything essentially, but it's how often he does the good things and then how often at times he's done less than good things. And it felt like over the course of the season, there was not a big enough step forward in that consistency to really say, oh yeah, you for sure got to bring this guy back. And if you have the number 1 overall pick again, for the second season in a row, the second draft in a row, I should say, it's hard to pass up a number 1 overall pick quarterback twice in a row unless you are 100% absolutely certain that the guy that you have is the better option. But if you pass on all the quarterbacks in 2 straight drafts and miss out on it, you see a guy like CJ Stroud go to Houston and be great. And now you go through this draft process and see one of these quarterbacks go to some team and be great. And you could have the option to get either of those potentially great quarterbacks, and you kept the guy that hasn't been great for you and he ends up not being great. That's very hard for a general manager to keep his job after a moment like that. However, I've come down from that just a little bit because of the way that the team is talking about this. They're definitely leaving all options open. They're not locked into any path yet, but Ryan Poles is basically taking the same approach this offseason as he did last year. He said, listen, like we're going to evaluate the quarterbacks, but I need one of these rookie quarterbacks to blow me away. if I'm going to trade Justin Fields and draft that quarterback, that rookie quarterback needs to blow me away. He said the same thing last offseason, and evidently Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, Anthony Richardson didn't blow him away. So then it's a question of, does Caleb Williams, Drake May, Jaden Daniels, etc., blow him away? Or look at them again and say, yeah, good, maybe good quarterbacks, but I'm not blowing away. So I'm going to keep the guy that I have here that I feel like can still blow me away sometimes. And I'm less certain that it's going to be a rookie quarterback for sure with the number 1 overall pick, but I do still think that's the most likely outcome.
Yeah, I think a couple of things. The first of which, as of today, if I'm the Bears, I'm taking a quarterback. Now, that doesn't mean the Patriots, with their new head coach and their new regime, can't entice me to move down a couple of spots. But I would make it very clear at the combine, quarterback. And I would have reports, but I would also tell Justin, hey, let's see here. We don't know that for sure. And in that way, who knows? Maybe a team comes up and says, hey, what if the Patriots offered you the 3rd pick plus another one, in a player or something where you're still getting a quarterback if you want one, or you're getting the elite wide receiver prospect in this draft, the top guy in Harrison, plus you have another top pick, plus you have multiple other ones. And like there is an offer that can be met, and there always is. I cover the Bengals for those that don't know. And prior to the 2020 draft, there were rumblings about the Miami Dolphins wanting to trade up, and they did want to trade up. And obviously they ended up with Tua. The Bengals ended up with Burrow. The Bengals get the better end of that deal, but they wanted Burrow. And I said, well, I would listen to the phone, even with Burrow. And I don't think there's a Burrow in this class where it's just this easy consensus number 1, but it could be close with Caleb Williams, but he's just not as accomplished, of course. And looking at it, I was like, well, that doesn't mean just the 3 ones that Miami has this year. It needs to be crazy, like generational. And why? Well, because you could have still gotten Justin Herbert and still had 3 or 4 other ones plus this, plus it would have to be a crazy offer. So if I'm the Bears, I would not shut down the idea of that, because you might get that offer. There might be a team that is that desperate. The Falcons may say, hey, we're going to get Bill Belichick, Caleb Williams. Bill, let's go. And I don't think that's realistic, but you can't completely close the door on that scenario. And that's why I would be open to it if I'm the Bears.
And on the reverse side of that, you never know what a team might be willing to offer for Justin Fields, right? Like even if the Bears sitting there saying, no, we really do want to keep Fields and just keep building around him. Like if a team like Atlanta calls, and I know you kind of hinted at it was Mel Kiper of ESPN who kind of said, yeah, the Bears could maybe get the 8th overall pick from the Falcons if they traded Justin Fields. I don't think that's a realistic return for Fields, but we saw a handful of years ago Sam Bradford go for a 1st and a 4th. Like if a team is desperate for a quarterback and really wants that quarterback, they will overpay for them. And I don't think the Bears are going to get that, but if a team really gives you the kind of offer you can't refuse on Fields, that changes the math, as opposed to if you go out there and get feelers on the Justin Fields trade and it's not much, well then, okay, are we in a hurry to trade him at that point? Like, do we have some flexibility there as an organization to kind of let this thing play out? Like, to me, I don't think it should be a dichotomy of black and white, like either draft a quarterback or keep Fields. Like, I think you could, in theory, keep Justin Fields and draft a quarterback. Maybe not with the number 1 overall pick, but like you said, could you trade down from 1, say, we're not in love with Caleb Williams, but at a lower pick number, wherever that ends up being, the 3 or 6 or 7 or 8, land Jaden Daniels, or if Drake May falls, or if you like Michael Penix or Bo Nix, and feel like, okay, we got a rookie quarterback that we like, and Fields can still start year 1 for that rookie quarterback, try and develop him on the bench for a little while, maybe a Mahomes, Alex Smith type situation, and then move on from there and manage what would obviously be a locker room controversy and a whole uproar in Chicago. But like, to me, the goal is to get Chicago the best quarterback it can possibly have. And I'd rather have 2 shots at that with Fields and a rookie, as opposed to going just Fields or just a rookie. Give me 2 lottery tickets at quarterback.
Oh, all right. So Bo Nix it is. He might be there in round 2.
Yeah, people said JJ McCarthy too, and I'm just like, maybe not. Maybe a little higher than that.
Not in Chicago. No, he's too small.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to be like, I think he works. Like, you could sell me, and he's fast, by the way. Like, you could sell me on him, not as fast as Fields. Fields is a freak, but you could sell me on him in certain areas, like windy, cold Chicago. Like, I do want a little size. I'm not saying you got to be 6'5" pocket passer, but like Justin Fields makes sense in Chicago on paper because he is strong. He does have the athleticism and strength and all of those things. Like I wouldn't want, I don't know. Name a small quarterback that Kyler Murray's got the arm strength, so I wouldn't worry about him. But
Bryce Young.
there are guys that just don't have it. Correct. Wouldn't want Bryce. Easy decision last year. I don't think anyone questioned it last year. This year, it will certainly be a big talking point. If you want more on the Bears, make sure you check out Lorin Cox on Locked On Bears. More on the Bengals and Joe Burrow. Well, I got you covered on Locked On Bengals. So for Lorin Cox, I'm James Rapien. Thank you so much for listening and watching a Wednesday edition of Locked On NFL.